The autumn rain pelted against the tall windows of Aldoria Palace as Captain Marcus of the Royal Guard made his evening rounds through the West Wing. His boots echoed on the marble floors, creating a rhythm he had grown accustomed to over 15 years of service. Tonight felt different, though. Something in the air seemed unsettled, like the calm before a storm that had nothing to do with the weather outside. Marcus had served under 2 queens now. The first, Queen Isabella, had been beloved by everyone in the kingdom. She possessed a warmth that could light up the coldest room and a genuine care for every person she met, from the highest nobles to the lowest servants. Her tragic death in a riding accident 3 years ago had left the entire nation in mourning. King Edmund had been devastated, barely able to function for months after losing his wife of 20 years. Then came Helena. She entered the palace as a duchess from a neighboring province, attending a memorial service for Queen Isabella. Within 6 months, she had captured the king's attention. Within a year, she wore the crown. The court whispered, "Of course." They always did. Some called it inappropriate timing. Others suggested she had calculated every move. But the king seemed happy again, or at least less haunted, and that was what mattered to most people. Marcus had reservations he kept to himself. Helena was beautiful, certainly, with her sharp features and carefully styled blonde hair. She knew how to smile for the cameras and say the right things at public events, but there was something cold beneath the surface, something that reminded him of winter ice over a deep lake. You never quite knew what lurked underneath. Tonight, his rounds took him past the royal treasury wing, a section of the palace that housed the crown jewels and various precious items belonging to the royal family. As he approached the heavy oak doors, he noticed something unusual. A thin sliver of light escaped from beneath the door. The treasury was supposed to be locked and dark at this hour. Only a handful of people possessed keys, and none of them had reason to be there at 11 o'clock at night. Marcus's hand instinctively moved to his weapon as he approached carefully. Years of training made his movements silent. He pressed his ear against the door and heard the unmistakable sound of someone moving inside, the soft clink of metal against metal, and whispered voices. His heart rate increased. A robbery? Inside the palace itself? It seemed impossible with all the security measures in place. He pulled out his master key and slowly unlocked the door, pushing it open just enough to see inside. What he witnessed made his blood run cold. Queen Helena stood before one of the glass display cases, her back to the door. The case was open, and she held something in her hands, examining it under the light of a small lamp. But she was not alone. A man Marcus had never seen before stood beside her, dressed in expensive civilian clothes. He held a leather bag and was carefully placing items into it, wrapping each one in black velvet cloth. Marcus recognized the jewelry immediately. It was Queen Isabella's personal collection, pieces that had been displayed in the treasury as a memorial to the beloved late queen. There was the sapphire necklace King Edmund had given Isabella on their 10th anniversary, the emerald bracelet she wore in her official portrait, the diamond tiara she had worn at Princess Sophia's christening. Each piece held not just monetary value but profound sentimental significance to the royal family and the nation. The ruby set should fetch at least 2 million, the stranger was saying in a low voice. My client in Switzerland is very interested. The sapphires even more. Just be quick about it, Helena responded, her voice sharp and businesslike. We have 20 minutes before the next guard rotation. Take everything from this case. The king never comes here anymore. Too many memories. By the time anyone notices, they'll be out of the country. Marcus felt rage building in his chest. He had sworn an oath to protect the royal family and the kingdom. But what did you do when the threat came from within the family itself, when the queen herself was the criminal? He knew he had to act, but he also knew this moment would change everything. There would be no going back once he stepped through that door. Taking a deep breath, Marcus pushed the door fully open and stepped into the treasury room. The sound made both Helena and the stranger spin around. The queen's face, usually so composed and controlled, went pale. For just a moment, Marcus saw genuine fear flash across her features before she quickly composed herself, lifting her chin in that haughty way she had. Captain Marcus, she said, her voice dripping with forced authority. What are you doing here? My rounds, Your Majesty, Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through his veins. The better question is, what are you doing here with Queen Isabella's jewelry and this unauthorized person? The stranger moved his hand toward his jacket, but Marcus was faster. In one fluid motion, he had his weapon drawn and pointed directly at the man. "Don't even think about it. Hands where I can see them. Now." The man reluctantly raised his hands, the leather bag still dangling from one wrist. Helena's expression shifted from fear to calculation. Marcus had seen that look before on the faces of criminals trying to talk their way out of being caught. "Captain, you're making a terrible mistake," she began, her voice taking on a silky quality. "This is a private matter. Royal business that doesn't concern the guard. I am the Queen, and I order you to leave this room immediately and forget what you've seen." "With all due respect, Your Majesty, I cannot do that," Marcus said firmly. "You are in possession of crown property and attempting to remove it from the palace with an unauthorized person. That is theft, regardless of your title." Helena's face twisted with anger now, the mask of composure completely slipping. "You forget yourself, Captain. I could have you dismissed, thrown in prison, ruined. Who do you think the king will believe? His wife or a mere guard?" Marcus felt the weight of that truth. She was right in one sense. He was just a captain of the guard. She was the queen. But he had served this palace and this kingdom with honor for 15 years. He had sworn an oath not to any individual but to the crown itself, to justice and to the protection of the realm. Queen Isabella had understood that. She had valued every person who served regardless of rank. "Step away from the jewelry, Your Majesty," Marcus said quietly but firmly. "Both of you move to the center of the room with your hands visible." The stranger looked at Helena, clearly waiting for her signal. She stared at Marcus for a long moment, and he could see her mind working, calculating her options. Finally, she gave the slightest nod, and both she and the stranger moved away from the display case. Marcus reached for his radio with his free hand, never taking his eyes or his weapon off them. "This is Captain Marcus in the Treasury Wing. I need immediate backup. Code red situation. Alert the King's private secretary immediately." The radio crackled with a response. Within minutes, Marcus knew the entire palace would be in chaos. The Queen caught stealing from the royal treasury. It was the kind of scandal that could shake the very foundations of the monarchy. As he waited for backup to arrive, keeping his weapon trained on the two criminals before him, Marcus thought about Queen Isabella and how disappointed she would be to see what had become of her beloved palace. The sound of running footsteps echoed down the corridor. The storm was about to break, and nothing in the kingdom of Aldoria would ever be the same again. Within 3 minutes, 6 royal guards burst into the treasury room, their weapons drawn and faces tense with alertness. Behind them came Lord Chancellor William, the king's most trusted advisor, still in his nightclothes with a robe hastily thrown over them. His gray hair stood up in various directions, and his reading glasses sat crooked on his nose, but his eyes were sharp and focused as he took in the scene before him. "Captain Marcus, report," Lord Chancellor William commanded, his voice authoritative despite his disheveled appearance. Marcus kept his weapon steady as he spoke. "Lord Chancellor, I discovered Queen Helena and this unidentified man removing items from Queen Isabella's memorial collection. The display case was open, and jewelry was being placed into that leather bag with apparent intent to remove them from the palace." William's face went ashen. He looked at Helena, clearly hoping for some explanation that would make this nightmare disappear. The Queen stood rigid, her arms crossed, her face a mask of defiance now that the initial shock had worn off. "This is absurd," Helena declared, her voice rising. "I am the Queen of Aldoria. I have every right to access any part of this palace, including the treasury. These items are royal property, which means they belong to the crown, which means they belong to me." "Actually, Your Majesty, that's not quite accurate," Lord Chancellor William said carefully, pulling a handkerchief from his robe pocket to wipe his brow. "Queen Isabella's personal jewelry collection was specifically designated in her will. These pieces are held in trust for Princess Sophia, to be given to her on her 21st birthday or wedding day, whichever comes first. They do not belong to the current queen consort, nor can they be sold or removed from the royal collection without the king's direct authorization and the approval of the royal council." Helena's jaw clenched. "Legal technicalities. My husband can change any rule he wishes." "Perhaps," William replied quietly. "But he hasn't. And until he does, these items are not yours to take, Your Majesty." The stranger who had been helping. Helena finally spoke up. his accent revealing him to be from somewhere far from Aldoria. "I was hired as a jewelry appraiser. I was simply examining the pieces at Her Majesty's request. This is all a misunderstanding." Marcus pulled out his radio. "Lieutenant Harris, access the Treasury security footage from the past hour and secure it immediately. Make copies and send them to the Lord Chancellor's office." The man's confident expression faltered. He had forgotten about the cameras. Helena's face flushed red with anger and, Marcus suspected, fear. She had underestimated the security systems, perhaps thinking her position as queen would place her above suspicion. "Where is King Edmund?" Marcus asked the Lord Chancellor. "Being woken as we speak," William replied. "He was at the summer residence reviewing documents. A helicopter is bringing him back now. He should arrive within 30 minutes. Those 30 minutes felt like 30 hours. Marcus's men secured the scene, photographing everything, collecting the leather bag full of jewelry, and taking statements. The stranger was escorted to a holding room, his credentials checked. He turned out to be exactly what he claimed, a jewelry appraiser, but one with a reputation for working with wealthy clients who preferred discretion. A polite way of saying he had connections to people who dealt in stolen goods. Helena refused to say another word without her lawyers present. She sat in a chair that one of the guards brought for her, staring straight ahead, her expression frozen in cold fury. Marcus noticed her hands trembling slightly, the only sign that beneath the icy exterior, she was terrified of what was coming. Princess Sophia arrived before her father. At 17, she was almost a woman now, though she still had the fresh face of youth. She wore a simple nightgown and robe, her long dark hair, so like her mother Isabella's, flowing loose around her shoulders. When she saw the open display case and her mother's jewelry spread across the examination table, her hand flew to her mouth. "Mother's things," she whispered, tears instantly filling her eyes. "Why are they out? What's happening?" "Lord Chancellor." William gently took the princess's arm and guided her away from the treasury room. "There's been an incident, Your Highness. Your father will explain everything when he arrives. For now, I think it's best if you wait in the private sitting room." But Sophia had already seen Helena sitting there under guard. The princess was sharp, despite her youth. She had inherited her mother's intelligence along with her beauty. Her eyes moved from Helena to the jewelry to the guards, and understanding dawned on her face. "She was stealing them," Sophia said, her voice barely above a whisper but filled with horror and disgust. "She was stealing my mother's jewelry." "Princess, please," William urged, trying to move her along. But Sophia pulled away from him and walked straight up to Helena. The queen didn't look at her, keeping her gaze fixed on the far wall. Sophia stood there for a moment, staring at the woman who had replaced her beloved mother, and when she spoke, her voice was clear and cutting. "My mother was worth 1,000 of you. These jewels meant nothing to her except as gifts from people she loved. She wore them because they made others happy, not because she cared about their value. And you would sell them like common trinkets. You're not fit to walk the same halls she walked." Helena's composure cracked just slightly. Her eyes flickered toward Sophia, and for a moment, something like shame crossed her features. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the cold mask once more. The sound of the helicopter landing on the palace grounds echoed through the halls. King Edmund had arrived. Marcus felt his stomach tighten with anxiety. The king was a good man, but he was also deeply lonely and had been desperate for companionship after Isabella's death. Helena had filled that void. Would he be able to see past his feelings to the truth of what his new wife had done? Edmund burst into the treasury wing like a storm, still wearing the casual clothes he had been working in at the summer residence. At 52, he was still handsome, with silver threading through his dark hair and the bearing of someone born to command. But the past 3 years had aged him. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there when Isabella was alive, and a weariness in his expression that never quite went away. He stopped short when he saw Helena under guard. "What is the meaning of this?" "William, explain immediately." Lord Chancellor William stepped forward, holding a folder. "Your Majesty, at approximately 11 o'clock this evening, Captain Marcus discovered Queen Helena in the treasury with an unauthorized person. They were in the process of removing items from Queen Isabella's memorial collection. We have security footage, witness testimony, and physical evidence. The pieces were being placed in a bag, apparently to be taken from the palace. Edmund looked at Helena, confusion and disbelief written across his face. This must be a mistake. Helena, tell them this is a mistake. Helena stood, and for a moment Marcus thought she might actually tell the truth. But instead she went to Edmund and placed her hands on his arms, looking up at him with wide eyes that suddenly brimmed with tears. Edmund, darling, this is all a horrible misunderstanding. I was simply having the pieces appraised because I was planning a surprise. I wanted to have replicas made for the museum wing we've been discussing, so the originals could be kept somewhere safer. I was going to surprise you with the idea at tomorrow's council meeting. It was a clever lie, Marcus had to admit. It sounded almost plausible, the kind of thing a thoughtful queen might do. He saw Edmund's expression soften, saw him wanting to believe her. Your Majesty, Marcus spoke up, knowing he was overstepping his bounds but unable to stay silent. The security footage has audio. We can hear exactly what was said. Helena's face paled. Edmund looked at her, really looked at her, and Marcus saw the moment when doubt crept in. Show me the footage, the king said quietly. Now. A guard brought in a laptop and they played the recording. Edmund watched in silence as Helena and the appraiser discussed selling the jewelry, talked about clients in Switzerland, and calculated how much they could get. His face remained impassive, but Marcus noticed his hands curling into fists at his sides. When the video ended, the silence in the room was deafening. Edmund turned to Helena, and his voice when he spoke was cold, colder than Marcus had ever heard it. 30 years I wore the crown beside Isabella. 30 years of duty, honor, and love. She never asked for much, just that her daughter be cared for and her memory respected. And you would betray that trust for money? You would steal from my daughter's inheritance? Edmund, I can explain, Helena started, but he held up his hand. No, he said simply. No more lies. No more explanations. I've been a fool, and that's my burden to bear. But I will not allow you to disgrace this palace or my late wife's memory any further. He turned to Lord Chancellor William. Draw up the papers. The marriage is to be annulled. I want her removed from the palace within the hour. Helena's composure finally shattered completely. You can't do this. I am the queen, the people, the press, the scandal. The scandal, Edmund interrupted, his voice rising now, is that I was weak enough to let someone like you into our home. Captain Marcus, escort Her Majesty to her chambers. She may pack one bag of personal items only. Everything else remains. The royal guard will supervise. As Marcus and his men moved to comply, Helena. The walk through the palace corridors to Helena's private chambers felt surreal to Captain Marcus. He had escorted many people in his career, from visiting dignitaries to arrested criminals, but never had he walked behind a queen being removed from her own home in disgrace. Helena moved stiffly, her head held high despite the circumstances, refusing to show weakness in front of the guards and the palace staff who had begun to emerge from their quarters. Drawn by the commotion, news traveled fast in the palace. Even at this late hour, servants lined the hallways, watching in shocked silence as their queen walked past under armed escort. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked vindicated, as though they had always suspected something was wrong with this woman who had replaced their beloved Queen Isabella. Marcus noticed that not one person met Helena's eyes or offered her a word of comfort. When they reached her chambers, Marcus stationed 4 guards outside while he and Lieutenant Sarah Chen, one of his most trusted officers, accompanied Helena inside. The rooms were lavish, decorated in cream and gold, with priceless artwork on the walls and fresh flowers on every surface. It had been Isabella's suite once, though Helena had redecorated it completely within weeks of moving in, erasing every trace of the former queen. You have 15 minutes to pack one suitcase, Marcus informed her. Personal items only. All jewelry, gifts received during your time as queen, and anything of significant value remains palace property. Helena whirled on him, her eyes blazing. Do you feel proud of yourself, Captain? Destroying a woman's life, making yourself the hero of this pathetic drama? I feel like I did my duty, Your Majesty, Marcus replied evenly. Nothing more, nothing less. Your duty, Helena laughed bitterly. She moved to her massive closet and pulled out a suitcase, throwing it onto the bed. Everyone in this palace worshipped Isabella like she was a saint. Poor, perfect, kind Isabella who could do no wrong. Do you know what it's like to live in the shadow of a ghost? To know that no matter what you do, you'll never measure up to a dead woman? Lieutenant Chen shifted uncomfortably, but Marcus remained unmoved. Queen Isabella earned the respect and love she received. She spent 30 years serving this kingdom with grace and genuine care for its people. Stealing her jewelry doesn't make you her equal. It just makes you a thief. Helena's hand trembled as she began pulling clothes from her closet, not bothering to fold them, just shoving them into the suitcase. I loved him, you know, Edmund. I actually loved him. I wasn't just some gold digger looking for a crown. I saw a lonely, broken man and I wanted to help him heal. I wanted to make him happy. Then why did you do it? Lieutenant Chen asked quietly. Why steal the jewelry? Helena paused, a silk blouse clutched in her hands. For a moment, her carefully constructed facade crumbled, and Marcus saw something raw and vulnerable beneath, because it was never enough. No matter what I did, how hard I tried, I was always the second choice, the replacement. People compared everything I did to what Isabella would have done. They whispered behind my back. They treated me like an imposter in my own home. She threw the blouse into the suitcase and continued packing, her movements becoming more frantic. That appraiser, Christopher, I met him at a charity event 6 months ago. We started talking and eventually he told me what those pieces were worth. Millions, tens of millions. I started thinking, why should they just sit in a display case as a shrine to someone who doesn't need them anymore? Why shouldn't I benefit from being queen? Isabella got 30 years of adoration. What did I get? Constant criticism and comparison. So you decided to sell your stepdaughter's inheritance, Marcus said flatly. I told myself I would replace them with perfect replicas. Sophia would never know. She'd get beautiful jewelry on her 21st birthday, and I'd have enough money to be independent, to have something that was truly mine. Helena zipped the suitcase closed with shaking hands. I never thought about it as stealing. I'm the queen. Queens don't steal. Former queen, Lieutenant Chen corrected gently. The words hit Helena like a physical blow. She sank down onto the edge of the bed, the reality of her situation finally seeming to penetrate her denial. What will happen to me? That depends on King Edmund, Marcus replied. He could press charges. Attempted theft of royal property carries serious penalties. Or he could simply let you leave quietly, stripped of your title and position. Either way, you won't be returning to this palace. A knock at the door interrupted them. Lord Chancellor William entered, looking even more exhausted than before. He carried a folder of documents and set them on the dressing table. Your Majesty, he addressed Helena formally one last time. The king has decided to be merciful. He will not press criminal charges. The marriage will be annulled on grounds of fraud and deception. You will be required to sign multiple documents, including a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. You will not speak to the press, write books, or give interviews about your time in the palace. In exchange, you will receive a modest settlement, enough to live comfortably but not extravagantly. You will also be required to leave the country within 72 hours. Exile, Helena whispered. He's exiling me. He's protecting his family and the monarchy, William corrected. This is more than generous considering what you attempted to do. The alternative is a public trial, prison time, and global humiliation. I suggest you accept these terms gratefully. Helena stood and walked to the dressing table, picking up the papers with trembling hands. She read through them quickly, and Marcus watched various emotions play across her face. Anger, shame, fear, resignation. Finally, she picked up the pen William offered and signed each document with sharp, aggressive strokes. There, she said, throwing the pen down. Is that all? Am I dismissed from this perfect sanctimonious palace? Almost, William said quietly. He pulled out one more document. The king requires a formal apology to Princess Sophia, written and signed. It will be placed in the royal archives. You don't have to deliver it in person, but you do have to write it. An apology, Helena repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. For the daughter who looked at me like I was something dirty on her shoe from the day I arrived. Princess Sophia treated you with appropriate courtesy despite losing her mother, and watching her father replace her within a year. Marcus said, his voice hard. You betrayed her trust and tried to steal her inheritance. Yes, you owe her an apology. Helena grabbed a sheet of palace stationery from the desk and began writing. Her hand moved quickly across the page, and when she finished, she thrust it at William without letting him read it. Take it. Take everything. I don't want anything from this place anymore. Lord Chancellor William glanced at the letter, his expression unreadable. He folded it carefully and placed it in his folder. A car is waiting for you at the east entrance. For discretion, you'll be taken to a private residence outside the city, where you'll stay until your departure from the country. Your bank accounts have been frozen except for the settlement amount, which will be released once you've left Aldoria. How efficient, Helena said bitterly. She picked up her suitcase and Marcus noticed how light it looked. A woman who had been queen just hours ago, reduced to a single bag of belongings. I suppose this is where I'm meant to have a dramatic moment of realization and regret? We're not filming a movie, Your Majesty, Marcus replied. This is real life, and real actions have real consequences. They escorted her through the service corridors of the palace, away from public areas. The fewer people who saw this final walk, the better for everyone involved. When they reached the east entrance, a black sedan waited with darkened windows. The driver stood beside it, his face carefully neutral. Before she got into the car, Helena turned back to look at the palace one last time. The ancient stone walls rose up into the night sky, lit by strategic lighting that made it look like something from a fairy tale. She had lived there for only 18 months, but it had been the culmination of every ambition she had ever held. Do you want to know the worst part? She asked suddenly, looking at Marcus. I really did love him. Despite everything, despite the comparisons and the coldness and the feeling that I would never be enough, I loved Edmund. And he'll never believe that now. Love isn't just a feeling, Marcus said quietly. It's a choice you make every day. It's loyalty and honor and putting someone else's needs before your own.
Queen Isabella understood that.
If you had truly loved the king, you never would have done what you did. Helena's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. Give Sophia her mother's jewelry. Tell her I'm sorry for more than just tonight. She climbed into the car without another word. Marcus and Lieutenant Chen watched as it drove through the palace gates and disappeared into the dark streets beyond. In the distance, the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. Do you think she meant it? Chen asked. The apology? I think she meant it in the moment, Marcus replied. Whether she'll still mean it tomorrow or next week is another question. People like that often feel sorry for themselves more than for the people they hurt. They walked back into the palace, and Marcus headed to the treasury to file his final report. The jewelry had been secured, photographed, and would be returned to its proper display. Princess Sophia's inheritance was... The morning after Helena's expulsion broke across Aldoria like any other day, except it wasn't. By 7 o'clock, every member of the palace staff knew what had happened. By 8, the royal council had been summoned for an emergency meeting. By 9, the king's private secretary was fielding calls from news agencies around the world who had somehow caught wind that something significant had occurred at the palace. King Edmund sat in his private study, staring at the untouched breakfast on his desk. He had not slept. How could he, knowing that he had been so thoroughly deceived? Lord Chancellor William sat across from him, along with the king's closest advisors, all wearing expressions of concern and careful neutrality. We need to control the narrative, said Lady Margaret Thornton, the palace's communications director. She was a sharp woman in her 60s, a veteran of several royal scandals over her career. The story is already leaking. We have perhaps 6 hours before the press runs with whatever version they piece together from anonymous sources. Edmund rubbed his temples. What do you suggest? A formal statement. Brief but clear. We announce the annulment of your marriage to Helena on grounds of irreconcilable differences and conduct unbecoming of the crown. We don't provide specific details which will fuel speculation, but prevents us from having to publicly accuse her of attempted theft. She tried to steal from my daughter, Edmund said, his voice rough with exhaustion and anger. She violated the trust of this family and this nation, and we're supposed to hide that fact. Your Majesty, with respect, a public accusation of theft requires proof presented in court. If Helena fights the charges, this becomes a years-long legal battle played out in the media. Princess Sophia would be dragged through testimony. Every detail of Queen Isabella's death and your subsequent marriage would be examined and re-examined. Is that what you want for your daughter? Edmund looked at Lord Chancellor William. What do you think? William sighed heavily. I think Lady Margaret is right. The truth will emerge eventually. These things always do. But by then the immediate crisis will have passed. Sophia will be older, stronger. The kingdom will have moved on. Right now we protect the monarchy and your daughter. Everything else is secondary. A knock at the door interrupted them. Princess Sophia entered without waiting for permission, her face pale but determined. She wore a simple blue dress and her hair was pulled back in a practical bun. She looked older than her 17 years this morning. I heard you talking in the corridor, she said, closing the door behind her. You're planning to lie about what happened. To protect me. She looked at her father. Don't. Sophia, this is not your concern, Edmund began, but she cut him off. Not my concern? Father, this is entirely my concern. Helena tried to steal Mother's jewelry, my inheritance. She betrayed our family. The people of Aldoria deserve to know the truth about the woman who was their queen. The people of Aldoria deserve stability and confidence in their monarchy, Lady Margaret said gently. Sometimes that requires discretion about private matters. Sophia walked to her father's desk and placed both hands flat on the surface, leaning forward to look him directly in the eyes. Mother never hid from the truth. When there were problems in the kingdom, she faced them head-on. She believed in honesty with the people. Are we going to dishonor her memory by covering up what happened with lies and vague statements? Edmund felt a surge of pride mixed with pain. His daughter sounded so much like Isabella in that moment that it physically hurt. What would you have us do? Tell the truth. Not every detail, perhaps, but the basic truth. Say that Helena was discovered attempting to remove royal property without authorization, and that her position as queen was therefore terminated. You don't have to turn it into a dramatic scandal, but you don't have to hide it either. Lord Chancellor William exchanged glances with Lady Margaret. Your Highness, the press will be merciless. They'll dig into every aspect of this story. Your mother's memory will be dragged through the tabloids again. Your father's judgment will be questioned. You yourself will be subjected to intense scrutiny and speculation. They'll do that anyway, Sophia replied. The only question is whether they do it while also speculating wildly about what we're hiding, or whether they do it with the basic facts already established. I'd rather control the narrative with truth than lose control with lies. Lady Margaret studied the princess for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're absolutely right. I apologize, Your Highness. Sometimes those of us who have been protecting the crown for decades forget that the best protection is often simply the truth. She pulled out her tablet and began making notes. We'll need to craft the statement carefully. Acknowledge the incident without providing unnecessary details. Express the king's disappointment and his commitment to the values that Queen Isabella embodied. Make it clear that the decision was immediate and decisive. And Helena? Edmund asked. What about the non-disclosure agreement? She signed it, which means she cannot publicly dispute our statement or provide her own version of events. If she tries, she faces legal consequences. She'll have to live with whatever narrative we establish. Edmund stood and walked to the window, looking out over the palace gardens. The rose bushes Isabella had planted were in full bloom, their red petals bright against the green leaves. She had loved these gardens, spent hours working in them despite the staff's protest that it was undignified for a queen to have dirt under her fingernails. Do it, he said finally. Release a truthful statement. But I want one more thing added. What's that, Your Majesty? Lady Margaret asked, stylus poised over her tablet. I want a public apology. From me. To the people of Aldoria. I brought Helena into this palace. I gave her the crown and the trust that comes with it. I failed in my judgment, and the people deserve to know that I take responsibility for that failure. Father, no, Sophia protested. This isn't your fault. Edmund turned from the window to look at his daughter. Isn't it? I was lonely and grieving, and I let someone into our lives without truly knowing who she was. I was so desperate to feel something other than pain that I ignored warning signs. Your mother would have seen through Helena immediately. I failed to protect you and your mother's legacy. That is my responsibility, and I will own it. The room fell silent. Lord Chancellor William cleared his throat roughly, moved by the king's words. That kind of humility from a monarch is rare, Your Majesty. It will resonate with the people. I don't care about resonating, Edmund said tiredly. I care about being honest. Now, what else needs to be addressed? The meeting continued for another hour, covering every detail of the crisis. The Royal Council would be briefed at noon. A formal statement would be released at 3 o'clock. Helena's belongings would be collected and sent to her within the week. Security protocols were being reviewed to prevent any similar breach in the future, and Queen Isabella's jewelry collection would be moved to a more secure location within the palace, with additional safeguards put in place. When the advisors finally left, Sophia remained behind with her father. They stood together at the window watching the gardeners work below. "Do you hate her?" Sophia asked quietly. "Helena, I mean." Edmund considered the question. "No, I'm angry, disappointed, hurt, but hate? No. I think she was a deeply insecure woman who made terrible choices. I feel sorry for her more than anything. I read her apology letter," Sophia admitted. "Lord Chancellor William showed it to me this morning. It wasn't what I expected. What did it say? That she was sorry for trying to take Mother's jewelry. That she had spent her whole life feeling like she wasn't good enough, and being your wife had magnified that feeling instead of fixing it. She said she understood now that you can't steal someone else's legacy to build your own. She wished things had been different." Sophia paused. She actually sounded human, almost sincere. Edmund put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "People are complex, Sophia. Very few people are purely good or purely evil. Helena made choices that hurt us, but she's still a person with her own pain and struggles. Understanding that doesn't mean forgiving her or forgetting what she did. It just means recognizing her humanity." "Mother would have said something like that," Sophia said softly. "Your mother was wiser than I'll ever be. I'm learning, though, slowly." They stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Sophia spoke again, her voice hesitant. "Father, may I see Mother's jewelry? The pieces Helena tried to take?" "Of course. Would you like to go now?" Together they walked through the palace corridors to the treasury. Captain Marcus was already there, supervising as the jewelry was being carefully catalogued and prepared for transport to the new secure location. He bowed when they entered. "Your Majesty." "Your Highness." "Captain Marcus," Edmund said warmly, "I haven't properly thanked you yet. You saved my family from a tremendous loss last night. You have my deepest gratitude." Marcus looked uncomfortable with the praise. "I was simply doing my duty, sir." "Duty performed with honor and courage. That's worth recognizing." Edmund paused. "I'm promoting you to Commander of the Royal Guard, effective immediately." "You've earned it." Marcus's eyes widened. "Your Majesty, Thank you. It's an honor." Sophia walked to the display table where her mother's jewelry lay spread out under bright lights. "Shh!" 3 months had passed since the scandal that shook the kingdom of Aldoria. The autumn leaves were falling now, carpeting the palace grounds in shades of gold and amber. The media frenzy had finally begun to die down, though Helena's name still occasionally surfaced in tabloid articles and true crime podcasts that dissected every detail of the midnight theft attempt. Commander Marcus, still adjusting to his new rank and responsibilities, walked through the palace on his morning rounds. The extra security measures implemented after the incident had become routine now. Background checks had been strengthened. Access to the treasury required biometric authentication from multiple authorized personnel. And a new position had been created, Chief of Internal Security, specifically tasked with monitoring threats from within the palace walls. It was a sobering reminder that danger didn't always come from outside enemies. Sometimes it came from people you were supposed to trust. Marcus found King Edmund in the palace library, a room that had become his refuge in recent months. The king sat in a leather chair by the window, reading from a leather-bound journal. Marcus recognized it immediately as one of Queen Isabella's personal diaries. "Your Majesty," Marcus said quietly from the doorway. "I don't mean to intrude." Edmund looked up and Marcus noted that he looked better than he had in months. There was color in his face again, and the haunted look that had been present since Isabella's death had finally begun to fade. "Marcus, come in. I've been meaning to speak with you." Marcus entered and stood at a respectful distance. Edmund closed the diary gently and set it on the side table. "I've been reading Isabella's journals," the king explained. "Something I couldn't bring myself to do after she died. It was too painful. But after everything that happened with Helena, I realized I needed to remember who Isabella really was, not just the idealized saint everyone made her out to be." "Your Majesty?" Edmund smiled sadly. "Isabella was wonderful, but she wasn't perfect. She struggled with things too. Did you know she almost left me once, early in our marriage? She felt suffocated by palace life, trapped by duty. It's all here in her journals. She nearly walked away from everything." Marcus remained silent, unsure what to say. "But she didn't leave," Edmund continued. She chose to stay. She chose to make it work. She chose to find meaning in service rather than seeing it as a burden. That's what made her special, not some innate perfection, but her choice to keep choosing the right thing day after day, even when it was hard. The king stood and walked to the window. I think I forgot that. After she died, I put her on such a pedestal that I forgot she was human. And then when Helena came along, I compared her to an impossible standard. No one could have lived up to the myth of Isabella that I had created. With respect, Your Majesty, Helena made her own choices. Her crimes were her responsibility. True, Edmund acknowledged. But I created an environment where she felt she would never be enough. I'm not excusing what she did, but I'm acknowledging my part in how things unfolded. That's important. Before Marcus could respond, Princess Sophia entered the library. She had changed in the past 3 months. She carried herself with a new confidence, a maturity that had been forged in the fire of scandal and crisis. She wore her mother's sapphire necklace as she did every day now. Father, the charity committee is here for your meeting, she reminded him gently. Already? Thank you, sweetheart. Edmund moved toward the door, then paused. Marcus, I wanted you to know that we've received word through diplomatic channels. Helena has settled in Portugal. She's living quietly under her maiden name, working as a translator. No interviews, no drama. She's honoring the non-disclosure agreement. That's good to hear, sir. It is. I hope she finds some peace. We all deserve that. After the king left, Sophia lingered behind. She walked to the window where her father had stood and looked out at the gardens. Commander Marcus, may I ask you something? Of course, Your Highness. That night when you discovered Helena in the treasury, were you afraid? Of the consequences of confronting a queen? Marcus considered his answer carefully. I was concerned about the position it put me in, yes. But I was more afraid of what would happen if I didn't act. Your mother's legacy, your inheritance, the integrity of the crown itself were at stake. That fear was greater than my fear of personal consequences. Sophia turned to face him. I'm glad we have people like you protecting us. Not just physically, but morally. You could have looked the other way. Many people would have. It never occurred to me to do anything other than my duty, Your Highness, I know. That's what makes you special, she smiled. Mother would have liked you. She always appreciated people who did the right thing even when it was hard. After Sophia left, Marcus continued his rounds. He passed through the treasury, where Queen Isabella's jewelry was now displayed in the new secure cases with state-of-the-art protection. A small plaque had been added beneath the collection, in honor of Queen Isabella, who taught us that true wealth lies not in what we own, but in how we serve. In the staff quarters, Marcus noticed a change in atmosphere. The tension that had gripped the palace since Helena's arrival had dissipated. People smiled more. There was laughter in the corridors again. It was as if the palace itself had been holding its breath for 18 months and could finally exhale. He found Lieutenant Sarah Chen in the security office, reviewing footage from the previous night's patrols. She looked up when he entered. All quiet last night, Commander, although I think Guard Jameson might have been sleeping during his 2 a.m. shift. The camera shows him very still for 43 minutes. Marcus sighed. Schedule him for additional training. Being comfortable in our security is exactly what led to the last incident. Already done, sir. Chen paused. Have you heard the news about Princess Sophia? What news? She's been accepted to the University of Aldoria. Political science and public policy. She'll be starting next fall. The king announced it this morning, Marcus smiled. That's wonderful. Queen Isabella always wanted her to get a proper education before taking on royal duties full-time. There's more. The princess has requested that she be allowed to live in regular student housing, not in a special suite. She wants the authentic university experience with just 2 security guards assigned to her instead of the full detail. The king agreed to that? Chen grinned. After 3 hours of negotiation and a promise that she'd check in twice daily, Princess Sophia can be very persuasive when she wants to be. She's her mother's daughter, Marcus said with affection. That evening, the palace hosted a small dinner to honor the staff members who had served with distinction during the crisis. It was King Edmund's idea, a way to acknowledge the people who kept the palace running even during turmoil. Marcus found himself seated at a table with other department heads, feeling slightly out of place among such high-ranking officials. The king stood to give a speech, and the room fell silent. 3 months ago, this palace faced a crisis that could have destroyed everything my family has built over generations. But because of the integrity, courage, and dedication of people in this room. We not only survived that crisis but emerged stronger from it. He looked around the room, making eye contact with various staff members. I learned something important through this experience. A kingdom is not defined by its crown jewels or its grand palaces. It's defined by the character of its people. From the guard who does his duty even when it's difficult, to the servant who remains loyal even when times are uncertain, to the advisor who speaks hard truths even when they're unwelcome. That's what makes Aldoria strong. Edmund raised his glass. To integrity, to duty, and to all of you who embody these values every day. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your loyalty. And thank you for reminding me what truly matters. The room erupted in applause. Marcus felt a swell of pride in his chest. This was why he had dedicated his life to service. Not for moments of glory or recognition, but for the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had helped protect something worth protecting. After dinner, Marcus stepped outside for some air. The night was cool and clear, stars visible despite the palace lights. He was surprised to find Princess Sophia sitting on a stone bench in the garden, also looking up at the sky. "Your Highness, you shouldn't be out here alone." I know. But sometimes a girl needs 5 minutes to herself, even a princess." "Sit with me? Then I'll have a guard present and everyone will be happy." Marcus sat, maintaining a respectful distance. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "Do you ever wonder what Mother would think of how we handled everything?" Sophia asked quietly. "I never knew Queen Isabella personally, Your Highness, but from everything I've heard about her, I think she would be proud of how you and the king responded. You chose truth over convenience. That takes courage." "Helena sent me a letter last week," Sophia said suddenly. "It arrived through a lawyer, very proper and official." Marcus was surprised but said nothing. She apologized again. Really apologized this time. Not the forced one she had to write. She said she's been in therapy, working through her issues with self-worth and validation. She said she understands now that she was trying to steal my mother's legacy because she was too insecure to build her own. Sophia paused. She wished me well with my university studies. She said she hoped. 1 year had passed since the night that changed everything at Aldoria Palace. The kingdom had moved forward as kingdoms do, but the events of that autumn evening remained an important turning point in the monarchy's history. It became known simply as the Night of Truth, a reminder that even in palaces, accountability and integrity mattered above all else. Commander Marcus stood in his office reviewing the latest security reports. His team had grown since his promotion, and the protocols he had implemented were now considered the gold standard for royal protection services worldwide. Other kingdoms sent their security chiefs to Aldoria to study their methods. It was a recognition Marcus accepted with quiet pride. A knock at his door interrupted his work. Princess Sophia entered wearing casual clothes, jeans, and a university sweatshirt. She looked every bit the typical college student, except for the 2 discreet bodyguards visible in the hallway behind her. "Your Highness, this is a pleasant surprise. How are your studies going?" Sophia flopped into the chair across from his desk with none of the formal posture required at palace functions. Marcus appreciated that she felt comfortable enough around him to be herself. "Exhausting but wonderful. I just finished a paper on governmental transparency that I think would make Mother proud. I actually cited the royal family's handling of the Helena situation as a case study in crisis management, through honest communication. I hope you received a good grade." The professor gave me an A and asked if she could use it as an example for future classes. So yes, I'd say it went well. Sophia's expression grew more serious. "Actually, I came to talk to you about something. I've made a decision about Helena's letter." Marcus waited, giving her space to continue at her own pace. I wrote back to her. I told her that while I couldn't forget what she did, I could acknowledge her apology and her apparent efforts to change. I wished her well in Portugal and said I hoped she found the peace and self-worth she had been searching for. "That was generous of you." "Your Highness?" "Maybe. Or maybe it was just necessary for my own healing. I've spent so much energy being angry at her, and I realized that anger was hurting me more than it was hurting her. She's moved on with her life. I needed to do the same." "Your mother would be proud of that maturity," Sophia smiled softly. "I hope so. I think about her every day. Sometimes I wonder what she would have done in my place, how she would have handled things. Then I realize that I can't live my life asking what Mother would do. I have to figure out what Sophia would do and trust that she raised me well enough that my choices will be good ones. They talked for a while longer about Sophia's classes, her friends at university, and her plans for the future. When she finally left, Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The young girl who had lost her mother was growing into a remarkable woman who would one day be an extraordinary queen. That afternoon, King Edmund hosted a dedication ceremony for the Isabella Memorial Library. The late queen's study had been transformed into a beautiful research space filled with her books, her papers, and her personal writings. Scholars had already begun requesting access to study Isabella's approach to humanitarian work and social reform. Edmund stood before the assembled crowd, which included government officials, scholars, and members of the public who had loved Queen Isabella. My late wife believed that knowledge should be shared, not hoarded. She believed that wisdom grew when it was passed on to others. This library represents those beliefs. It's not a sealed shrine to the past, but a living resource for the future. He pulled a ribbon, and the doors to the library officially opened. People filed in slowly, reverently, looking at the photographs and reading the quotes from Isabella's speeches that lined the walls. Edmund watched them with a mixture of sadness and contentment. This was a proper memorial, something that honored Isabella without freezing her in time. Later that evening, Edmund sat in his private quarters with Lord Chancellor William, sharing a glass of wine. They had become closer friends over the past year, bonded by the crisis they had navigated together. "I received an interesting call today," William said, "from the Portuguese ambassador." Edmund raised an eyebrow. "About Helena?" "Indirectly. Apparently, she's been volunteering at a women's shelter in Lisbon, helping women who have escaped abusive relationships. She's been using her language skills to help immigrants navigate the system. The ambassador thought I should know that she's making positive contributions to the community." "How do you feel about that?" William considered his wine thoughtfully. "I think people are complicated. Helena did a terrible thing, and she faced appropriate consequences. But that doesn't mean she can't also do good things afterward. Maybe the experience taught her something. Maybe hitting rock bottom was what she needed to find her real purpose. Do you think I should acknowledge this somehow? Send some indication that I'm aware of her rehabilitation?" "No," William said firmly. "Your obligation to Helena ended when she signed those papers and left Eldoria. What she does now is between her and her conscience. You focus on your kingdom and your daughter. That's where your energy belongs." Edmund nodded, accepting the wisdom in those words. Some chapters in life needed to close completely before new ones could truly begin. Meanwhile, in Lisbon, Helena sat in a small café near the shelter where she volunteered. She had changed in the past year. Her hair was simpler now, no expensive styling. Her clothes were practical rather than fashionable. She wore no jewelry except a simple watch. To anyone looking at her, she was just another middle-aged woman trying to make her way in the world. But inside, Helena was fighting battles every day. Fighting against the shame that still sometimes overwhelmed her. Fighting against the temptation to feel sorry for herself. Fighting to believe that she could be more than the worst thing she had ever done. When Princess Sophia's letter had arrived 3 months ago, Helena had cried for 2 hours. Not tears of self-pity, but tears of genuine gratitude that the girl she had tried to hurt had found it in her heart to offer even a small measure of grace. That letter sat in Helena's apartment now in a frame on her bedside table. On her hardest days, she read it to remind herself that redemption was possible. Her therapist had helped her understand the deep insecurity that had driven her destructive choices. She had spent her entire life trying to be someone important, someone worthy, someone special. She had measured her worth by external validation, by titles and status and the envy of others. When she became queen, she thought she had finally achieved that ultimate validation. But the reality was that the title had only magnified her insecurities rather than fixing them. Losing everything had been devastating, but it had also been liberating. She was nobody now, just Helena Dorchester, translator and volunteer. And slowly, painfully, she was learning that being nobody was okay. That worth didn't come from crowns or titles or comparing yourself to impossible standards. It came from doing good work, helping others, and being honest with yourself about who you were and what you had done. She would never forgive herself completely for trying to steal those jewels. She would carry the shame of that night forever, but she could choose what to do with that shame. She could let it destroy her, or she could let it teach her. She was trying every day to choose the latter. Back in Eldoria, The anniversary of Queen Isabella's death arrived. It was always a solemn day in the kingdom, marked by memorial services and quiet reflection. But this year felt different. There was less raw grief and more gentle remembrance. The nation was learning to honor Isabella's memory, while also moving forward with their lives. King Edmund and Princess Sophia attended the service at the royal cathedral, along with Commander Marcus and the palace staff. The archbishop gave a beautiful homily about how the dead live on through the values they taught the living. After the service, Edmund and Sophia walked through the palace gardens together, following the path that Isabella had loved. "Do you think we've handled everything the right way, Father?" Sophia asked. "With Helena, with the scandal, with everything. I think we've handled it the best way we knew how," Edmund replied. "We chose honesty. We chose accountability. We chose to move forward while honoring the past. I don't know if those were perfect choices, but I believe they were right choices. Mother would approve, I think." "I hope so." Edmund stopped walking and turned to face his daughter. "Sophia, I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about the future, about the crown and succession." Sophia looked suddenly nervous. "Father, you're not sick, are you?" No, nothing like that. But I'm not getting any younger, and I want to start preparing you more actively for your eventual role as queen. Not because I'm planning to abdicate anytime soon, but because I want you to be ready when the time comes. Your mother and I didn't prepare enough for the possibility that she might not always be there to guide you. I won't make that mistake. I'm only 18, Father. I know. But your mother was 19 when she started taking on serious royal duties. You're intelligent, compassionate, and you have excellent judgment. The kingdom will be in good hands with you." Sophia felt tears prickling at her eyes. "I hope I can be half the queen Mother was." "You'll be your own kind of queen, and that's exactly what you should be. Learn from your mother's example, yes, but be